Sempre me perguntam qual é o futuro do dinheiro. O dinheiro hoje representa 40% dos gastos das famílias. É um volume muito expressivo aqui no Brasil. Existem alguns países do mundo, por exemplo, os países nórdicos, onde o dinheiro tem prazo de extinção. Tem países onde eles já definiram que até 2030 não terá mais circulação de dinheiro, somente os meios digitais. Aqui no Brasil, esses 40% são representativos e a nossa expectativa, nós como GetNet, nós acreditamos que o Pix terá um papel muito importante em reduzir esse valor de dinheiro em circulação. Nós não temos dúvidas que o Pix pode ajudar a reduzir os custos. Nós sabemos todos que nós temos custos de transporte de moedas, custos de reposição de moedas, assaltos, violências, uma série de custos, né, que nós chamamos aí de parte do custo Brasil, e o Pix tem aí um objetivo. Então, nós, GetNet, acreditamos que aqui tem uma oportunidade de melhorar a eficiência no Brasil. Nós estamos vivendo no país um momento muito especial. Tem uma série de projetos definidos pelo regulador entrando, como o Pix, como a Lei de Proteção de Dados, como a Circular de Recebíveis, que regulamenta toda a parte de recebíveis digitais no país, o Open Bank. Eu não tenho a menor dúvida que este evento com o exame pode ser um grande alavancador de um debate profundo e vai ajudar a esclarecer uma série de dúvidas para todas as pessoas e fortalecer alguns conceitos também sobre todos esses sistemas regulatórios que estão no mercado.
Se você entrasse numa máquina do tempo e voltasse 20 anos no passado e contasse a si próprio que no futuro você poderia trabalhar basicamente de onde quisesse, em qualquer lugar do mundo. Você poderia tocar times, projetos, muitas vezes empresas inteiras, sem nunca ir ao escritório. Que você concluiu que não precisaria mais ter carro, já que era mais barato e cômodo contratar carros com motoristas que chegariam minutos depois de você apertar um botão. Ou você poderia fazer uma videoconferência em tempo real, andando na rua com pessoas que estão do outro lado do mundo. E que, por exemplo, nas suas férias, você, que pagaria a conta do almoço com seu relógio e faria as melhores compras sem entrar em uma loja sequer, se hospedaria de forma mais confortável que num hotel, na casa de alguém que você nunca ouviu falar. Bem, você provavelmente acharia que você ficou louco no futuro, ou então que você tivesse, na verdade, 20 mil anos à frente e não apenas 20. O que acontece é que, diante de grandes disrupções tecnológicas, o avanço nos chega cada vez mais rápido, inventando um mundo cada vez mais futurista. Eu sou Marcelo Sampaio, cofundador e CEO da Hashdex, a maior gestora de criptoinvestimentos e ativos blockchain do Brasil. E justamente por trabalharmos com investimentos em tecnologia, muita gente nos pergunta sobre o futuro do dinheiro. Aqui na Hashdex, acreditamos que se nos últimos 20, 30 anos a internet da informação mudou completamente as nossas vidas, nas próximas décadas, blockchain, também chamada internet do dinheiro ou internet do valor, provavelmente mudará nossas vidas ainda mais. Se tem uma coisa que o passado nos ensina sobre o futuro, é que o futuro não é sobre certezas, mas sim sobre possibilidades. Isso em investimentos se mostra ainda mais verdade. E é isso que exatamente nós fazemos na Hashdex. Nós permitimos que investidores de todos os tipos ganhem acesso a esse futuro possível. E tudo de forma simples, completamente segura e 100% regulada. Para nós, é uma grande honra fazermos parte desse evento da Exame, que visa aprofundar essa discussão tão importante sobre o futuro do dinheiro.
A corrida pela inovação está cada vez mais acirrada, detalhada e principalmente personalizada. Na era da experiência, é necessário criar soluções que conversem diretamente com os consumidores, evidenciando de maneira simples como determinado produto otimizará sua rotina e auxiliará em atividades do dia a dia. E nesse cenário, que os smartphones com telas dobráveis ganham destaque e se posicionam como uma forte tendência tecnológica nos próximos anos. Em 2020, com a primeira versão do Galaxy Fold, a Samsung foi pioneira em comercializar no país um smartphone com tela dobrável. Ainda nesse ano, lançamos por aqui o Galaxy Z Flip e nesse segundo semestre apresentamos nossa terceira geração de smartphone com telas dobráveis em apenas um ano, o Galaxy Z Fold 2. A Samsung tem a inovação no DNA e, como líderes de mercado, temos a responsabilidade de oferecer às pessoas novas maneiras de se comunicar, novas estratégias para trabalhar e novas formas de se conectar. E seguimos firmes nesse propósito, ouvindo atentamente o feedback de nossos consumidores para continuarmos antecipando tendências e superando todas as barreiras que a vida nos impõe. E é com essa visão de futuro tão instigante e motivador que damos as boas-vindas a todos a esse grande evento da Revista Exame.
Quer saber como as novas tecnologias impactam a forma como você se relaciona com o seu dinheiro? Então fica aqui com a gente no Future of Money. Senhoras e senhores, mais uma vez, sejam muito bem-vindos ao Future of Money. Para quem ainda não conhece o evento, esse é o maior evento sobre o futuro do dinheiro da América Latina, em que estamos abordando temas como sandbox regulatório, PIX, Open Banking, Fintechs, LGPD, criptoativos e hoje, em especial, blockchain, né? Então, a gente está no nosso último painel da noite, mas não menos importante, eu espero que vocês tenham feito bom proveito dos conteúdos até aqui e eu torço que vocês tirem o máximo dessa próxima conversa que nós vamos ter agora. Eu trago para vocês o nosso último convidado de honra da noite, Paul Veradittakit. Ele é sócio no Pantera Capital e um dos primeiros venture capitalists a investirem na indústria de blockchain e tem muita história boa para contar. Assim como nos demais painéis, a gente vai alterar para o inglês e caso você prefira, você pode acessar nossa tradução simultânea que vai ser colocada pelo nosso operador aqui no chat. Now switching to English, Paul, it's really amazing having you here with us. First of all, thank you for accepting our invitation and welcome to Future of Money.
Thank you very much for having me, Nicholas. I'm excited to be here.
Nice. Regarding your last name, did I spoke it properly?
Yeah, it sounded pretty good. You know, it's pronounced Veradittakit, so it's similar to the way that it's spelled. And I'm Chinese and Thai, so the Thai nationality kind of made the last name a little longer than I would have liked.
And your last name means truth be told, right?
I'm not sure. I think it just means buy Bitcoin. I think that's what it means.
Nice. So before we start here, I've made a brief introduction of you to our audience in Portuguese, but no one better than you to tell us a little bit about your story. So please go ahead.
Sure. Thank you very much. You know, it's been a long journey. I've been in blockchain and cryptocurrencies for, let's just say, about 7 years now. So
wow,
I feel like
you're almost a dinosaur in this industry, right?
Exactly. I feel like the only thing missing is to actually shake the hand of Satoshi. It's been so crazy.
Right.
But you know, it's been quite the journey. You know, I started off actually my career as an economic consultant. So really just doing a lot of economic and financial analysis of many different types of projects. And then, you know, like a lot of other people in Silicon Valley, I got into startups. So in 2008 to 2010, I was helping a lot of startups around business development and growing their user base, you know, around sort of e-commerce and daily deals. So, you know, helped a lot of companies build partnerships and also fundraise. And then starting in 2010, that's when I went to the dark side. I joined a venture capital firm and I started doing investing. You know, it was interesting. I actually didn't know too much about venture capital at the time. To me, I thought it was a way to dive deeper into financial transactions and investments, but also just really, you know, help companies early on. You know, I really didn't know the ins and outs of venture capital until I got into the space, but I felt like it was a great way to see a lot of different projects and a lot of different amazing ideas really early on and be able to sort of get a landscape view of everything. And so I started off my career looking at just one space, which I think is great because I continue this whole theme of being very focused on one space. So I was looking at mobile at the time, mobile apps and mobile infrastructure. So this was in 2010 when the iPhone really started gaining a lot of traction, especially in emerging markets. And we started seeing apps finally get over 1 million downloads. That was actually a milestone at the time.
Yeah, for sure.
And
were you at Pantera at the time?
No, this was another VC fund called Strive Capital. Yeah, so again, just using a very data-driven approach to find mobile apps for us to invest into. And I did that for a couple of years and I felt like it was great. You know, I was early on in mobile and this was before people were starting to really look at it or even definitely not focus on it. And so it really gave me an advantage to sort of pitch myself as a value-added investor. But, you know, shortly after that, like there's not a huge learning curve to get into mobile. And so a lot of other VCs started coming in and it became very crowded. And as you know, when things get too crowded, you don't have that edge, right? You don't have that sort of advantage. And so for me, I was looking for that next step in my career. And I started reading about this thing called Bitcoin in 2013. And some of my VC friends were telling me about it. And I'll be honest, I dismissed it at first. I thought this was just some sort of scam. I mean, you know, it's not tangible. You know, virtual currencies exist all the time, you know?
The overall initial reaction to Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, especially back then when you started reading about mining and this anonymous founder. I mean,
and Mt. Gox.
And Mt. Gox too, which was just about to happen. And it's just, there wasn't a lot of credibility and there wasn't a lot of things that I could really sort of relate to. And so I dismissed it, but then later on that year in 2013, I started to look at different companies to join and I ran across Coinbase. And I thought to myself, interesting, let's read some more material on what sort of use cases Coinbase could sort of enable. And it was the fiat on-ramp and it was use cases around finance and payments that really got me thinking that, you know, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies is really a way for people to move value in a peer-to-peer way without intermediaries, and especially with finance, without government control or without sort of banks and legacy intermediaries that sort of extract fees. And with that one use case on its own, I really thought that this had a ton of potential, both for sort of a way for people to store wealth and also to transfer value. And so once that sort of just clicked in my head, I wanted to get deeper into the space, whether it was on the entrepreneurial side or whether it was on the investing side. And luckily enough, Pantera Capital was starting to launch their funds. And, you know, I felt like that was a good fit. So with Pantera, you know, since 2014, I've been focused on early stage investments. That means investing into equity or investing into tokens. And we've built up a great team around us, you know, a team of 20, 25 people with about 800 million of assets under management, all looking to invest and provide value in this strategy.
Now, given that you invest in crypto ventures and blockchain ventures since 2014, am I correct?
Correct.
Could you please make a short list of companies that you helped grow in the last few years?
Sure. So one particular, you know, use case that I am really excited about is really just how cryptocurrencies and blockchain can really provide, you know, material difference to the emerging markets. And, you know, I think there's just a lot more consumer use cases around store of value and payments for, you know, sort of the non-developed countries. And therefore, you know, for us, like when we first started investing into this space, we started looking at local brokerages and exchanges that would help facilitate the ease of entry into gaining exposure into cryptocurrencies. And what that means is Pantera has targeted certain geographies to invest into the top brokerages, or you'd say the Coinbase of each of these different geographies. And that's actually where some of our most successful investments have been in, is into these large brokerages and liquidity providers in different regions. And actually, that's what brought me to Brazil in 2014. So early, but I actually came down to Brazil, I remember in October, and I was talking to Mercado Bitcoin. I was talking to BitInvest at the time, that's not around anymore. Yeah. Foxbit, all of these exchanges and entrepreneurs and influencers try to understand what was going on in the region, because that's what I was doing. I was traveling to these different regions where there was high inflation, strong capital controls, friction around getting access to banking, but really strong penetration of mobile phones and potentially virtual currencies and things like that. And so that's really where we've made some of our investments, is into that model in different regions. We have a play in Latin America called Bitso, which is actually one of the largest brokerages and exchange in Mexico. It's the largest by far in Mexico. It's expanded over to Argentina. It's starting to expand over there in Brazil. And we can be very helpful to those companies because we can provide help with recruiting. We can provide help with strategy, business development, and also fundraising and expansion of different revenue lines. So in this particular sector alone,
more like a venture builder model than venture capital by itself, right?
Exactly. I mean, we've had a history of success with this model with companies like Bitstamp, which sold for $350 million. Corbit, which sold for $150 million. That's a Korean brokerage. Bitstamp's a global brokerage. Coins.ph, which is a Southeast brokerage, sold for $100 million. So we've invested in so many of these early on, and we sort of know the playbook in terms of expansion. And so overall, we try to get, really hands-on with these companies. If you think about it, we are trying to create, I wouldn't say an index, but I would say definitely placing bets in certain categories that we think are very important for the space. And there's a lot of collaboration between each of these categories. So as we bring new companies into the portfolio, easiest thing that we do is have them try to see if they make sense to work with each other in certain ways. And then, of course, we bring our experience and expertise in certain verticals, like the brokerage and on-ramp vertical, to really help them scale, because we know exactly what it takes, because we've been helping companies succeed in that vertical since 2014.
I see. You mentioned coming to Brazil in 2014. At the time, did you invested in any of the companies that you spoke to? And if not, why didn't you?
Yeah, I think for us, we looked at Brazil, and it was just so early at the time. And I think one of the things was there was that initial set of users that are just really passionate about crypto, but felt like there was still a gap there to sort of get it a bit more into the mainstream. And so I think for us, we wanted to be able to sort of see maybe a bull run or two to happen and see how the companies would react and accelerate during the bull runs to figure out which companies were worth investing into. So, we did not invest in 2014, very, very early, didn't really see there was a clear path for a certain company to sort of break out yet. And of course, 2017, the first huge bubble, definitely gave us a lot more clarity. And then, of course, right now, as we head into this next bubble, we feel pretty confident that, it might be Bitso or it might be another company, but this is probably the time where companies are really going to start breaking out in emerging markets and start looking, the winners are starting to appear.
Yeah, but in Latin America, you managed to invest in Chapo as well, right? Before Coinbase bought them.
We have several bets in Latin America. We have Xapo, which actually, so Coinbase bought the custody business. So the custody business is now within Coinbase, but Xapo actually still facilitates a lot of, storage and, not storage, but about payments using cryptocurrencies in Latin America. So they are still fully operating. We're also in Ripio. Ripio actually also has a brokerage model too in Argentina, and has something in Brazil. But on top of that, they set up a consumer lending product too. So we have a few bets in Latin America. We're not opposed to investing into more. I think right now the trend in Latin America is, outside of continuing to provide on-ramps to consumers, but I think it's all around, you know, stable currencies, and it's all around remittances. So I think we're seeing people develop different types of stable currencies, and potentially targeting areas like Colombia, Venezuela with super high inflation, and trying to figure out different corridors for remittances that make a lot of sense using cryptocurrencies in the back end.
I see. And you mentioned investing in tokens and in equity, right?
Yes.
In your opinion, what are the main differences between investing in traditional ventures and in blockchain versus crypto ventures?
Sure. I think there's two differences, and then there's a lot of similarities. You know, I think for us, like, we want to be the first check into these early stage deals, whether they are tokens or whether they are equity. So, you know, these deals range from, you know, maybe $1 million rounds all the way up to $10 million rounds. And, you know, for us, the way that we look at it is there's a lot of similarities. You're looking at a great team, a team that you trust, a team that hopefully has some experience and maybe some advantages around some of the knowledge and, you know, some of the you know, connections and things like that, and domain expertise. And so it all comes down to the team, and we're always going to have that be the most important thing. Then, of course, you get into the technology, the product, the go-to-market, the competition, the landscape. And I think at the end of the day, if there's a large market, there's a strong strategy and a team that we can back, you know, those are sort of the high level that overlaps everything. Obviously, the economics have to make a lot of sense. You know, I think for us, like, we're looking for venture type returns, you know, 10 to 100x return. So, you know, not looking for anything that's going to be sort of a cash flow business.
Asymmetric gains, right?
Asymmetric gains. And, you know, for the most part in crypto, that's all you get, right? It's usually really big or not. And so that's the great thing about crypto.
Right?
And so next, I think the difference between a token or equity deals is with equity deals, like, you're building IP and you're sort of keeping that closed source, and your main strategy to build value in the company is to actually generate revenue. And it's just like any other sort of traditional fintech business, you're probably going to extract some sort of fees providing some sort of product or service. So that's kind of what you get on the equity side. On the token side, what's different is it is exactly what you know, we had a chat about before. It's community owned, it's open source, and you are trying to incentivize new users to try your product or technology to basically help bootstrap the network, and for helping to, you know, onboard and sort of provide different, you know, services within the product to actually make it function. You know, people get rewarded with tokens, and so the tokens can really help sort of bootstrap a network. But in addition to that, all of the fees that are generated, or all of the value that's generated, goes into the token itself, and there's no outside revenues and whatsoever. So you need to make sure that the token is actually needed within the network. For instance, like Bitcoin, if you actually want to send value Bitcoin, you actually need to pay transaction fees using Bitcoin. Ethereum, if you want to actually run smart contracts on Ethereum, you need to pay gas in Ethereum. So it's needed to sort of access the network. You know, with Augur, which is a decentralized prediction market, you know, people that are providing a service of providing data to settle these markets and contracts when people are betting against, you know, certain, like, if people are betting Trump versus Hillary Clinton, there needs to be people to actually give accurate data on who actually won that election. And so all of that is being compensated in that native token. So that's the important thing, is we need to make sure that value will accrue to this token And whether it's used for access, whether it's used for payments, whether it's used for, earning some sort of reward by holding the token, these are all things that we need to evaluate. And I think the last thing that is different is tokens are, when you're investing in tokens, you get tokens. When you're investing in equity, you get equity. But equity is a long-term endeavor, because the path to exiting on the equity side is either an acquisition or an IPO, and that could take 7 to 12 years.
Yeah.
But with tokens, you're launching.
Pretty mature enough, right?
Exactly. But with tokens, the go-to-market is sometimes the next day, or sometimes, within a few months, and at most probably like a couple of years. So liquidity is much, much different. And, that's kind of how you sort of look at it too, is you have to be very, very hands-on with the management of your position, because you're really turning yourself from a hedge fund to sort of a hybrid venture fund, because you're looking at these positions really early on, but then a hedge fund because they are fairly liquid.
I see. And looking backwards, we see huge improvements in the blockchain and crypto landscape, right? From business models to user experience of many projects. What are the greatest improvements in your opinion, since you're a dinosaur in this industry? You saw a lot of those changes, correct?
Nicholas, that's a great question. There's been a lot of changes. And, in 2014, we've pitched a lot of the same investors that we did back then until now. And, some of the questions that were asked by institutions at the time were really around regulations and around, is this technology going to work? Is it going to get hacked? Is it going to break? All of that kind of stuff. I think the progress that we've made is that Bitcoin has been resilient. It has never gone down. Ethereum and other competing networks have launched and are gaining quite a bit of traction and resiliency. So the technology part has been de-risked quite a bit, both from the fact that the largest blockchains are working and functioning well, or now not super well yet. They're going to function even better soon. And then there's just a lot more alternatives for decentralized technologies to actually work. The regulatory part, actually, we feel like there's been a lot of progress, with the OCC saying that national and chartered banks can actually custody cryptocurrency right now. It's actually a lot more clarity from the SEC. And then, of course, even some other countries like China stating that they want to start a, central bank digital currency and other. There's been a lot of progress all around. So now those questions have been really de-risked, and what we're talking about right now is what's holding us back is a little bit of scalability, which I think we're starting to see some progress being made there. And then I think secondly, like you mentioned, user experience and making it a lot easier for people to get into the space by not having to think about public and private keys, not having to sort of go through many, many steps to get to get fiat into crypto, and then hopefully be able to just have more sort of smart contract security, things around insurance, things like that.
Auditability, right? And
yeah,
that would be also my next question. What are the main barriers to the growth of the blockchain technology, and how do you believe we could overcome them? Also, Carolina Campbell from our audience is asking a question that you probably already answered, that one of the blockchain's main problem is scalability. How do you see this problem being solved by companies you follow?
Yeah, great question. So I guess I'll just answer backwards. I'll start with scalability and then I'll get into...
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. Definitely. And the first part was scalability, and then what was the first thing again? It was around...
It was around the main barriers to the growth of the blockchain technology, and how do you believe we can overcome them?
Yeah, and around security and things like that too. No, I agree. So yeah, getting a little bit deeper into some of the things I was talking about before around scalability. So Bitcoin, 10 transactions per second. Ethereum slightly better at, let's just say 15 transactions per second. I mean, we need to get to thousands of transactions
right now,
per second.
we're facing a clogging in the Ethereum blockchain, right? Because of the transactions and things like that.
Exactly, and that's kind of why these bull runs are really important for, even just starting off on a high level and kind of going down into scalability. These bull runs are really important. Number one, because it just gets more and more people looking at the space and getting exposure to crypto. Second of all, it gets a lot more entrepreneurs into the space because people are now seeing that there's a lot of progress and a lot of hope in terms of some of the disruption that blockchain can do. But I think
and also a lot of problems to be solved, right? So
bingo.
When you bring new people, you not only bring speculators, but also people interested in solving problems.
Exactly. That's the third thing I was going to mention was these problems are arising from all of the usage that's going on in the space, and those are good problems to have. And some of these are problems that existing crypto entrepreneurs that are already in the space are kind of moving over and solving. But a lot of these, especially as some of the Web 2.0 companies or Web 2.0 entrepreneurs want to actually solve some new problems on the blockchain, they're seeing these problems, and then of on-ramps and things like that, and user experience, that they're going to try to solve those problems also. In terms of scalability, I mean, Ethereum has the Ethereum 2.0 coming out soon, and that should provide proof of stake, which is sort of a new way to sort of help get more people involved in sort of participating and securing the network. And then the second thing would be around scalability and sharding. So that's one answer.
How do you think we will get there? Do you think it would be a straightforward road, or that there will be a lot of challenges ahead for ETH 2.0?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the scale that they have, there's definitely going to be challenges that happen along the way. I think they need to be very methodical about how they roll it out. I mean, even ETH 2.0 staking, you're able to start, putting Ether into the deposit contract, but there's still a lot of concerns on, what that will look like in terms of, sort of financially and also security wise. And so they really do need to be, just methodical about how they sequence the events of rolling out both staking and scalability. But I think on top of that, though, there's the main chain, and then there's also what you call layer 2 side chains that are going to help, potentially scale Ethereum. And we're investors in a few of those types of companies. But outside of that, there's also new types of blockchains that we've invested into that are finally coming out to market. So the fact that like blockchains like Polkadot, blockchains like Near, Solana, Oasis, which is coming out tomorrow, bringing privacy and scalability, all of these are going to be great because if you're the only one in the room, there's no one pushing you, right? Now we have 4 or 5 well-funded competitors pushing you and are getting to much more scalable numbers quickly. And that's the big thing, is a lot of these projects don't want to try out new blockchains until they're actually at mainnet, where you can actually see things in production. Now that all of these companies are, out there in production and companies are building on top of them, Polkadot, Oasis, these are all ones that should be bringing thousands of transactions per second to the blockchain. And so with DeFi right now, one of the problems was, if I want to get into a DeFi project and execute a transaction, when it's clogged, there were times where I was spending almost $100 to send a transaction through on Ethereum. That's not gonna. How do you decentralize finance when you can't decentralize the access to that finance? You know what I mean? So I think that hopefully will be solved. Let's just say 2021, I think, is gonna be a huge year for scalability.
Yeah, that's also a question from our audience, from head of Islamic Academy here, André Portillo, who moderated one of the last debates and also the debate with Dan Moorhead. He asks, how do you see the current stage of DeFi, decentralized finance, and how early in the process are we? If you could, before you answer that that question, just give a little briefing of what is DeFi and why it's important, and then you proceed to answering this question.
Yeah, I can also loop in some of the challenges of DeFi, but and most of the challenges outside of scalability are revolving around DeFi, since that's gotten sort of the most traction. So DeFi is basically, there's a couple ways you could sort of characterize DeFi. I mean, we sort of take a very, very broad top-down approach where we think, starting with Bitcoin, that's decentralized finance. I mean, basically, it's being able
agree more.
and everybody always talks about Ethereum and other use cases, but like, if you can send,
it's decentralized money. How could not it be?
It is exactly. Yeah. So basically, decentralized finance is starting off on the highest level with decentralized store of value, decentralized money like Bitcoin, and then you start going into other use cases. Think about like all the things that banks do, right? And decentralized finance is basically disrupting what banks do. And so it starts with basically being able to send money to each other without having banks. And you can do that on a distributed ledger where everything is just like a bank. You have a ledger, you can see all the transactions happening. The only thing is you're sending this on an immutable ledger where it is executed trustlessly. And that's like the first basic thing of decentralized finance, is just being able to send transactions to each other. And then being able to then do so in sort of a more scalable way. That's kind of what we have decentralized exchanges for. You can actually do decentralized trading, decentralized spot trading, decentralized derivatives, all of this in sort of an order book sort of way, and be able to sort of, facilitate liquidity. That's kind of now kind of taking a step higher in terms of, doing transactions between each other. And then you start going into other things that banks do. Well, banks do things like lending and borrowing, right? So imagine being able to do so all over smart contracts where, you put a certain amount of collateral in, and there's a certain, potential term, and all the rates are being determined in sort of an algorithmic way that you can sort of see on the blockchain, and all the settlements and everything is all done over smart contracts. And so that's kind of what's been going on right now is,
and more there's also governance, right?
Yeah. Then that gets into sort of deeper stuff where as you are using the tokens either to make these transactions, these tokens are potentially providing all token holders or the community potential fees and value because you need these tokens to actually use the product or network. But on top of that, people are layering on governance, which provides a better way for these companies to sort of scale, because at the end of the day, if these projects aren't controlled by a central party and they are decentralized, then it makes the regulatory obligation of that project completely decreased, because at the end of the day, there isn't one person directing what's going on. The whole community actually takes over the entire decision-making process around certain things like where value should sort of be directed to within the tokens, maybe potentially some sort of features, some sort of, which sort of assets get listed, all these type of things. And the more decentralized that you go, the more that, you can really sort of expand both in terms of, the types of users you can onboard and potentially the different types of assets and different types of things that you can do all across different jurisdictions. So, the power of the it's almost like the tokens are counting as sort of proxy votes. And, it becomes really interesting because then, you have politicians out there that are trying to sort of gather votes and trying to position different topics and things like that. So and that's kind of where the whole ecosystem sort of needs to mature, because at the end of the day, if you want to be able to get as many people involved with these projects, you need to solve scalability. You need to solve the fact that you can do transactions very cheaply. You need to be able to solve the on-ramps where you can make it very easy for people to get tokens. So, credit card, debit card, bank accounts, all of that needs to be built within the interface of these products.
User experience, right? It should be easy for people to join this kind of services.
Exactly. In terms of being able to just get on-ramped in crypto and being able to sort of get set up with your wallet all in sort of a trustless way, those steps need to be sort of broken down. And then, of course, like security and insurance. So that's why auditing firms are probably some of the most well sought after companies right now, because all of these companies are trying to launch it. They need to get audited. There needs to be insurance behind each of these smart contracts. There needs to be ways that you can run some of these applications on the blockchains without having to worry about infrastructure and costs and tooling. So all of these are being solved by entrepreneurs right now.
Okay. My last question here. Actually, I have two more.
Sure.
Are related to the polarity on the crypto industry. So we have blockchains versus DLPs. We have crypto assets versus private digital currencies and CBDCs, decentralized finance versus centralized finance. Do you believe there's room for all of them, or we are in a race for the winning spot in each of those cases?
Yeah, I think there is room for both. Just like I don't think that the dollar is going to go away in the US. I think for the most part, both centralized and decentralized technologies are going to coexist. And I think the same thing with sort of private blockchains and public blockchains. I think the innovation was around public blockchains because at the end of the day, public blockchains solves the trust problem, right?
Yeah.
And when you have a private blockchain, there's not as much sort of trust that's sort of needed, because at the end of the day, like it's still semi-centralized. But I think that there are certain use cases that make a lot of sense for private blockchains, and so there's been a lot of experimentation on the private blockchain side. But I think private blockchains are tackling corporations, enterprises, and institutions. And until you can figure out a way where it contributes to the bottom line in a significant way, or contributes cost savings, which it can be because it's removing human capital that's providing that trust. But again, a lot of these institutions are slow moving, and there's a lot of change that would need to happen for that to go into effect. That or it's solving regulatory issues around finance that need to be solved by governments. Until those things happen, we're sort of going to be in that sort of pilot phase. While public blockchains, I think, are sort of catering to the retail market and of course into the store of value side for institutions, which I think is something that's a little bit more eminent. But in terms of CBDCs, I actually think that that's potentially a way for governments to start experimenting more with private blockchains. And I think it's one of those things where in certain geographies, it can make a lot of sense. And I think at the end of the day, it really helps out with the public blockchain side of things, because, it'll just get more and more people familiar with, cryptocurrencies and virtual currencies. And potentially it provides more on-ramps for cryptocurrencies in general. And, I think that's going to be really helpful. It's a rising tide floats all boats. And, governments thinking about CBDCs will hopefully open them up to more public blockchain stuff.
Sure. So my last question here, what do you see as the main trends in blockchain investments in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so I think for us, like, we are likely done with scalability for now. We feel like we've positioned ourselves well in terms of new blockchains and, let's just say, side chains or other sorts of technologies that will help blockchain scale. I think we're going to be focusing a lot more on, DeFi applications. And so that'll mean maybe it's uncollateralized lending, maybe it's things around decentralized insurance, maybe it'll be, other sort of use cases But I think actually beyond that, like we'll start seeing a lot of the use cases that we've invested into right now in the US expand over to more emerging markets. And I think that'll be really, really helpful too. And I think the last part is just hopefully there's going to be some non-financial use cases of blockchain technology that we'll start deploying more capital into. So, you know, one of the companies that we invested into recently is a decentralized SoundCloud. So enabling artists to basically monetize any of their content, starting off with music, but it could potentially be anything that is streamed or other things directly with the consumer instead of having to go through YouTube or having to go through Spotify, etc. So once you start creating marketplaces where the transactions happen directly from the creators themselves and the users, and being able to remove the middleman that's taking anywhere from 30 to 50% fees, and having the token be there to sort of bootstrap a network, I think that becomes really, really interesting. And so, you know, I'll let you guys know if I launch a Paul coin. Hopefully you guys will be some investors.
A human IPO, right?
Yes, a human IPO.
Okay, Paul, so unfortunately our time is up. It has been an outstanding chat. I hope we can repeat this anytime soon. Do you have any final considerations that you would like to make?
No, I think this is a great time to be like just buying Bitcoin in general. But you know, outside of that, I mean, to learn about cryptocurrencies, to be experimenting, to be building, you know, I think we're at the beginning of a huge bull run. And, you know, I think having a little bit of skin in the game or having a little bit of exposure, you know, I think is sort of smart to start the learning process. And of course, I've been educating people since 2014. I'm happy to continue to sort of educate. You guys can follow me on Twitter at my last name, Veradittakit, and happy to answer any questions now or even sort of afterwards digitally.
Great, Paul. Thank you for being here with us and sharing your vast knowledge. I will now switch back to Portuguese, okay?
Thanks.
Pessoal, obrigado a todos aí. Essa foi a nossa última live do dia. Para quem não conseguiu acompanhar as outras lives, estão todas gravadas no YouTube da Exame, então não deixe de conferir. A gente vai ter mais 2 painéis de debate na semana que vem e na outra. O próximo vai ser Private Currencies, então muitos painelistas interessantes também. E na outra semana teremos o debate sobre sandboxes regulatórios. A gente tem aí sandbox do Banco Central, da CVM e da SUSEP, né, que já estão caminhando aqui no Brasil. Então também são temas super relevantes para vocês acompanharem. E por hoje é só isso. Deixo aí um grande abraço e espero que vocês tenham aproveitado o conteúdo. Falou, boa noite.